Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try and keep the energy up because I know everyone's probably getting a little tired towards the end of the day. I wanted to point out that I'm lucky enough to actually have two real educators who have logged time in classrooms and school districts, schools in their respective communities. So we're going to bring the discussion a little bit more maybe down to earth and talk about some of the issues that they've been dealing with in their positions. I wanted to start by taking a moment to look back a little bit on the last 8 years. We've been talking about political administrations and their impact on education. So I thought maybe each one of you could reflect on your experiences about the last 8 years and some of the national education policies and how it has affected you in the roles that you have now.
Sure.
Want to start first? Or?
I mean, I think the last 8 years have brought some incredibly important gains for us nationally. When I think about some of the most exciting things, I would say is that the high school graduation rate is significantly up nationally for the first time in 30 plus years, and most of that progress happened between 2008 and 2014. So when you look at the data from 2014, we have our biggest high school graduating class. It's the most diverse and reflects the most low-income students, and at the same time, college readiness rates have stayed flat. But spread across many more students. College enrollment rates are up, especially for going right after high school, which, as we know from the data, is really important to getting kids through college. So I take those as major wins that came from an administration that used a lot of incentives to get states to move aggressively. They pushed innovation, evidence-based reforms, and that has had a positive effect. From my own work in Baltimore and on the Maryland State Board, I would say charter schools and the proliferation of charter schools have been a real game changer. So while the evidence nationally about their impact is mixed, I think in our inner city cores, they have drastically, or dramatically perhaps is the right word, changed the trajectory for low income and black and brown students, and that's been a big thing that's happened over the last 8 years. My day job is that I work with Bob Balfonts at Johns Hopkins University, and he coined the term dropout factories for our lowest performing high schools with graduation rates of less than 67%. And in the last 8 years under this administration, we've cut the number of dropout factories in this nation in half. So there were 1,500 when he first did the analysis. There are only about 750 left now. So I think a lot of really important things have happened in the last 8 years. In terms of my work on the state board, I think the bad news about that is we've picked the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. We've fixed the things that were going to be an easier lift, and what's left in front of us are some significant and intractable issues that we have to face going forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say for Minnesota, it's been very positive. We've been able to really look at the law and under the waivers and develop a school support system that is valued by educators, that feels supportive to them, mm-hmm. and put accountability in its right spot. Mm-hmm. To help drive those levers that really make a difference for kids. We've also seen higher graduation rates, mm-hmm. especially for students of color and our students with disabilities, which has been a huge focus. We've been able to fix some of our funding systems in a more consolidated and flexible way of use of funding with school improvement processes. So that's been a very positive outreach. I think one thing that gets overlooked a lot because of the focus on evaluation and test scores, which I think was a little bit of an overstep. Yep. But I think that the focus on teacher quality and support systems for teachers and the push around the teachers as the professional in the classroom was a positive one that came out of this administration. Mm-hmm. So I think that is also a very big push and positive for our state. And then I can't get rid of the segment without talking about early childhood. Yes. So I think that early childhood and the Race to the Top initiatives around early childhood was a huge game changer for us in Minnesota. and also the kind of standards around Head Start and improving the quality of Head Start programming in our state. So there are a number of really good things, I think, that came out of this administration that we should continue and move forward with. And then, of course, this administration and the president, working with the Congress, put in place the Every Student Succeeds Act. So that got done, and that is an important step forward for all of us in the United States. So.
I wanted to ask a question specifically about early childhood because you mentioned it on an earlier panel. Allison Klein from EdWeek thought that maybe that was one area where we might see some consensus amongst lawmakers in terms of the federal role. Can you talk a little bit more just about maybe your individual experiences with early childhood education, and if you indeed agree with that, moving forward, that this might be a place where we can see some consensus?
Well, I'm actually a Head Start baby myself. So I have a personal investment in knowing that preschool makes a difference for children, and early literacy skills and language development, and the support to the families that Head Start gives. So early childhood education is absolutely a critical first step. And I do think, I also heard when I was listening to the debates in the town hall when President-elect Trump was speaking, and I was just taken aback, like, wow, the second thing that came out of his mouth was education, because we hadn't heard anything about education. So I felt like if that off-the-cuff remark is where his heart is coming from, maybe there's a glimmer of hope in there that education will take a priority for this president-elect after he gets a chance to settle down and start thinking about his policies. So I try to assume good at first, and we'll hope to see where he goes with early childhood. But it didn't get broad bipartisan support with ESSA. I mean, it's mentioned. I know that Senator Murray really pushed for it to be included, but it's watered down, and it'd be nice if we could get Head Start reauthorization going. It's overdue. And also get a bigger focus on some of those child development grants to states.
Laura, before you answer, can I just put a little filter on it? Because you focus at the secondary level, I mean, in some ways, your perspective on early childhood is very interesting because you're sort of seeing what happens down the line. So can your answer sort of share a little bit from that perspective as well?
I'll do my best. So I think when I think about early childhood, specifically in Maryland, we've done a lot to advocate the expansion of pre-K and universal kindergarten. And I think the role the state has played that's been so important has been about ensuring quality and really holding the programs to a higher standard. And we're really proud of the work that we've done with that. What we see nationally from the work that we do at Hopkins is that even in our most challenged school systems, you often see elementary schools where minority and low-income students keep pace with their peers through 5th grade. And this is some important research that we've done is everybody's heard the 90-90-90 schools, and that's become, I think, part of the lexicon of what is possible at elementary school. But when we look at the middle schools that we work with, and you look at kids who've come from elementary schools proficient or advanced in reading and math, and you think like, no problem, we got this in middle school, like those, in other words, those reforms are going to trickle up as the kids move up in the grades. What happens at middle school? Why don't those advantages hold? And I think what we're coming to understand is the role of poverty, that the long-term effects of concentrated poverty cannot be overcome without specific targeted action. So Dr. Balfons has done some research about just the role of children's lives in communities of concentrated and generational poverty. And I know this is not our topic, so I won't go far into this, but it's not enough just to get kids through elementary school feeling good. You actually, when they get to middle school, every kid needs close personal scrutiny to make sure they're holding on to those gains and not slipping back.
So I need clarity. I don't know what the 90-90-90 schools are. So, and I'm going to presume that maybe some people here don't. Am I the only one who doesn't know this?
I see a hand in the audience.
Okay. So can you very briefly, what are they?
I think there have been a number of reports written about these schools that are 90% free and reduced price lunch eligible students, 90% minority students, and 90% proficiency or above rates.
Okay.
So sort of debunking this notion that your zip code or your income level determines your ability to perform on state assessments or to attend a high-performing school. But I think for a long time we've banked on, hey, get the kids to a certain level in preschool or get them through elementary school reading on grade level, and it does not mean you can take your foot off the gas when they transition to middle school. Even if it's a K-8, lots of districts have moved to K-8s to diminish whatever gains were lost in the transition between elementary and middle school, and it's not enough.
Okay.
Can I say one quick thing about that?
Because we got a lot of topics here.
I think the one thing to know is that those are cumulative effects that happen with children as they go over, so you have to overcome their adverse childhood experiences that they have. But I think also one thing that's overlooked often is that tests are harder as grade levels get up.
For sure.
And cut scores are harder. To be considered proficient, it's tougher as the grades go. So it's not like kids, are always not at the level that they should be. It's because simply the standards are harder and the tests are harder and the cut scores are higher.
Okay. I want to move specifically to ESSA now to look ahead, just because we're crunched on time and I want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So like everyone else said, if you have questions, start thinking about them now, and when it's time, we'll line up at the microphone and ask. We've talked a lot about the new flexibilities for state leaders and that states are in charge under ESSA. Are you excited about these flexibilities, and are you also challenged by them in terms of capacity issues, in terms of where you are?
Well, I think that this has been somewhat a misunderstanding of the new ESSA law, that people think, oh, states can do whatever they want. I mean, you still have testing, grades 3 through 8, math and reading. You have to have equal weighting for that. You still need to consider growth or some other academic measure. We really only have one other new indicator of accountability around this kind of well-rounded quality indicator, which is where Minnesota is really interested in what does that mean for kids and delivering more opportunity and access for children around equity so that we can raise student achievement. So I'm not sure where the conversation is about all this extra flexibility. I don't see that there's a lot of extra flexibility, but we do have some opportunity how we define that and how we work through that. But I think it's more of a kind of curve in the bend in the road than it is a complete U-turn off of accountability. And I think that's how other chiefs feel as well, that we're continuing forward with our plans and continuing forward with the work and just doing what we think we need to do for kids.
Now, in terms of a lot of the research that I know my organization has done, state capacity is usually an issue that comes up. I mean, have you been dealing with that in terms of your agenda, both, in days past and then looking forward as well? And how have you managed it?
I think I am very excited about the implications of ESSA and the chance to reflect on what we've learned and apply. It's a moment to pause and think about, hey, all those times we complained about what was going on in the last few years, how do we want to do things differently now? And with a robust round of stakeholder engagement, there's a chance to re-engage some partners who maybe have disengaged over the last few years. So I am enthusiastic about it. I think the capacity issue is real. My vision for the way this would work the best is it's really going to demand new relationships between SEAs and LEAs. So traditionally, in my experience, so Brenda, jump in and tell me if your experience is different, but in my experience, state departments of education were set up as monitors, as compliance officers, as funders, and what is demanded now is more of like strategic thought partners working, shoulder to shoulder, sleeves rolled up with districts to figure some of this out. I think the capacity issue cuts across states and districts and is going to just demand some new ways of working together, which is always challenging to the status quo.
And that's exactly what I inherited in the Minnesota State Department. Teachers would tell us they just hide underneath when the State Department would come out of their desks. But we have, when Arnie Duncan came out and said, you have waiver and you have this flexibility, we took him at his word, and we really developed a whole new system of strategic support to schools, so that our focus was about supporting technical assistance and being a good coach and doing it regionally through through the state and through our state cooperatives that we had, and to take what we had that was good and make it even better, to support teachers alongside them rather than a top-down approach. And that's really worked for us, and so we're going to continue that through ESSA. In terms of capacity, what we've done is just go to our state legislature and say, and we've had advocates there who have been part of our regional centers of excellence, this new support system that we've had under our waiver, and they've been supportive of providing additional dollars to that support. So we'll continue to go back and ask our state legislature. And with ESSA, we now have the 7% for school improvement. That does provide some opportunity to be able to focus on school principal leadership and school improvement in different ways that maybe were a little top-heavy with the previous administration.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think an example of dealing with this issue of capacity is, I just want to give a shout out to John White in Louisiana and the work that he's doing. He convened a webinar of people all over the country a few weeks ago, and he basically said, we know there were things about SIG that didn't work. So he's writing his ESSA plan, right? He's like, let's learn from all the money we poured into SIG that did not translate into better outcomes for kids. And one thing we know is you can't impose school reform on a district. It doesn't work. It doesn't take. It doesn't last. It doesn't get you the results in 2 or 3 years. It's not that simple, and it's not that easy. So what he said is, I want to know if you are an organization. So he said, I asked my staff, who's doing what in school improvement and with what effect? And they had to come back to him and report, like, sadly, there's not like a school improvement directory out there that tells you everything everybody's doing and what outcomes they've gotten. So he asked any organization that thinks they have something to add for kids in Louisiana to send in their information, and what he's going to do is convene everybody like in a big convention center room in mid-January, and he's going to have these partners, whatever their offerings may be, sitting side by side with school districts, talking about co-developing a plan for school improvement. So again, not force-fitting things, and I think that's the kind of forward thinking this is going to demand to get to the next level.
Interesting. When I reflect on the last couple of years in education, I think about the big words and the big issues that have been at the fore: technology, charters, assessment, career and technical education. Moving forward, do you see these on your horizon? Are you prioritizing one more than another? Do you have any priority areas? What are the big issues for you moving forward?
So there's been a lot of conversation about Common Core. That's really just about standards. What should kids know and be able to do? You have to have a guidepost for teachers in the classroom and what they're going to know and be able to do. And for Minnesota, we've kept our standards the same, so that will be. I think the issue was the assessments to those standards, and then the assessments then being part of a teacher evaluation. And that's really what kind of unraveled the Common Core intent of having high standards for children to meet.
Brenda, good news, you're getting lots of head nods in the audience while you're saying that. So yes,
and I think
Brenda.
had they not tried to have the assessment do everything,
right,
and that if the assessment could have been just, how do you measure a student's annual progress, I don't think we would have had the kind of pushback that we had, because I think that's what was originally intended in a very bipartisan way. I mean, this was brought by business leaders and governors who said, let's get together and develop these standards. So now they did them, and now they want to jettison them out. Well, that would just be a whole big upset to the system. I think another piece of advice that I might just kind of intervene to the new administration is, you don't want to just jettison out the regulations either. I mean, we've been working hard for a year, plus it will be a complete distraction to anything that they want to bring forward, because it takes a long time to do rulemaking.
Yeah.
And that would be a distraction. Rather, why don't they just regulate when we turn in our plans? That's what the former administration did. I can't tell you how many back and forth calls I had to Arnie and all of the US Ed folks saying, no, but we want to do it this way. So that negotiated process is the way for them to kind of, influence their policy agenda, rather than spend their time rewriting all new rules and being distracted.
Right. That's a good point.
I mean, just to pick up on a point that Brenda made, if they jettison the regs, it's pushing the responsibility back to the states to develop regs, and that we're getting farther and farther away from the ability to compare across states, to have a body of knowledge about all of our students around the country. And I think there is a role for the federal government to play in terms of ensuring accountability and equity. I said many nice things about the last 8 years, but the truth, and they're all true, but the truth is, if you scratch beneath the surface, the progress in states was uneven. And that means capacity and a plan and focus in a state, in a district, matters. It's not just going to happen without that. And so, to me, that is the role of the feds, to come in and where there's not that capacity, make sure somebody is thinking in those ways. So to push, the point I was trying to make is to push those regs back to the state introduces 50 different political contexts and a huge time factor and element. I think they're very necessary. States actually, I think, want guardrails for how to move forward.
But I do think that no matter what you try to do under accountability, you're always going to have 50 different.
It's a federalized system.
Yeah, you're always going to have 50 different state plans, because that's just how we are localized in our delivery of education.
Okay, I'm going to pause because I know it's time for questions, so I encourage anyone to step up. Hey, Rebecca. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Thesson. I'm an assistant professor of educational administration and also a former central office employee. I just wanted to ask a little bit about the idea of how you've been building capacity in Minnesota and just what you spoke about in terms of the work the state's doing. When we look at NCLB, one of the major critiques of that legislation was the lack of direction, guidance, funding given to build capacity to facilitate school improvement, and specifically instructional improvement at the school level and at the district level. And yet, your state's doing some good work, but then in a lot of cases, the district superintendent is turning over pretty rapidly, 2 years or less in most urban areas. What guidance?
State chiefs, too.
Yeah. What guidance do you have for other states and also for districts when you think about doing this work of building capacity over time under ESSA when more responsibility is placed on them and in light of the frequent turnover in leadership?
So the keys there are to make things leader-proof. And the best way to make things leader-proof is to get your legislature behind and have really broad stakeholder engagement, and to involve your teachers. If your teachers are involved in developing those policies, then typically, because there's a lot of teachers, right? In our state, we have over 60,000 teachers, and if they're supporting something, then they're going to be talking about it in their communities and with leaders and with their legislators of the state houses. And so I think that that's critical. And so what we did in Minnesota was, with the waiver, we developed a statewide system of support by building on what was already there and not really working. So our cooperatives, which were these 11 regional centers throughout our state, we're a large geographical state, they were just developing plans, and what we wanted to do was work on implementation of the plans, not just putting something on a shelf, but actually doing things for kids and helping teachers be better teachers for kids that look very different than the kids that they had been typically teaching because of our diverse demographic shift quite rapidly. And then we, in 2013, passed a law called the World's Best Workforce legislation, which then codified strategic planning at the district level, required stakeholder engagement of communities that are in the schools, as well as teacher engagement. And then they develop those plans, they own those plans, they own their school improvement plans, and we work as coach and help them through implementation science to be able to look at the data and do a continuous improvement model. And we're just really guides on the side and getting them the resources that they need to be successful. I think one other thing that we've done in Minnesota really well is advocate against silver bullets. And national policy and ideas, things that we knew would become a big distraction, parent trigger, A to F grading, retaining third graders, you name the policy. We were trying to guard against any of that stuff that seemed like it was going to be a fix, but really we just invested in teachers.
We should end the panel now, because there's not going to be a better answer than that.
And it's all on our website on how we did it. All the tools are on our website. We encourage everybody to go. We won an award from the Harvard Ash Center for Government Innovation. So we're pretty proud of this work around supporting our schools and their teachers.
Well, there's no dropping the mic here, so we're going to have another question. Good.
All right.
Talk about pressure now. My name's Tommy Sheridan. I'm with the National Head Start Association.
Yay.
And as a native Minnesotan as well, I'm probably your biggest fan here, Commissioner Casillas, so thank you. I guess my question is something that I've been hearing from a lot of Head Start grantees across the country, and conversations they've had with a lot of their LEA partners, and really it's so what should we be doing?
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot, and we heard this throughout the panels earlier, here is that there's so much uncertainty. What advice would you give them? There's a lot of excitement, I think, from ESSA about coordination, collaboration, but now with a lot of questions, what would you say?
Brenda, you're going to have to take this one.
We've been investing in Head Start. So we invested in the last funding session $10 million in Head Start. And we've also been looking at mixed delivery systems with our childcare programming. And so we've been trying to intentionally partner. We have also a scholarship program that targets for our poorest kids, gives $7,500 to families to be able to choose their own childcare, whether it's private or school-based. We also have a set-aside. We have Pathway 1s where they're a full parent choice, and then Pathway 2s that go to school so that they can plan and be able to do facility changes and that kind of thing, and know that they're going to have that number of kids showing up. And then the governor won $25 million for universal pre-K for 4-year-olds last session. And so we are really trying to do this kind of multi-pronged approach so that everybody stays happy in the early childhood space. And I would suggest to Head Start that you continue to partner with your local school districts in any way that you can to coordinate services, especially transportation, which becomes quite a barrier to some of our families, especially in rural isolated areas. So those are my suggestions. Partner in mixed delivery, raise standards, advocate at the state capitol for more funding for Head Start, and work with human services to use multi-layered funding so that you can go to all-day programs rather than just half-day programs. That helps families too. So I mean, early childhood is just a win, right? It helps the kid, it helps the parent, it helps the family, helps the economy. It's just such a win all around for everybody. So do it.
There you go. Those are our marching orders, everybody. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Matt from the Center on Education Policy, and I just have a quick question about President-elect Trump's mixed messages on education. How, at the state level, do you deal with those mixed messages at this point, looking forward?
Question.
I think probably with most of the country, we're taking a breath right now and not moving rapidly in any one direction, and that's the honest answer. I mean, there's a lot of mixed messages, right? There's also fewer carrots and sticks at the Secretary's disposal to make things happen. So I think it's a wait and see period of, unfortunately, of a lot of uncertainty for everyone. And I wish I had a better answer. Hold on, maybe Brenda has a better answer. So let's give her the mic. Brenda, take us home.
I would say, see what you get when you get teachers up here. Pretty soon we'll lead you in an activity too. We're going to ask you to get up and stretch pretty soon, So everybody at home on your table now, stand up and stretch. So I would say that it's been really challenging because the largest rhetoric that we've been dealing with has been some of his anti-Muslim speech, and some of the bullying that we've seen in our schools has been really challenging. And so we heard some of that in the earlier panel. So I wish if I could talk to Donald Trump right now, I'd say, please, address the nation and start talking in a more positive way about our children and about our communities. We're all Americans. So that would be the number one thing. And then focus on the things we agree on. Early childhood. I mean, his daughter came out with a big early childhood push, and start with what we agree on. Because, and also Representative Ryan, Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, I think that he also has a poverty agenda. Go out and talk to him. What is it that we can do to try to do things to support families like housing, jobs, transportation, urban development, rural issues. I think there's a lot of common ground that could be had if they pick the things that they can agree on rather than fight about the little things that they don't. That's worked for us in Minnesota.
We're going to let that be
I hope
the
you're
very,
right.
Yes, and we're going to let that be the very optimistic final note, because I'm going to get in trouble here if we talk anymore. But thank you. This is great. We really appreciate it.